We've been in formal session for 2 full days now, and we felt that you needed a little bit of a more relaxed atmosphere for the early part of the evening, especially knowing as we do what's still ahead for the rest of the evening. So we're now going to engage in a time-honored tradition for the temple, where all of you as students get the opportunity of asking questions that you might want to have clarified for yourselves. I'll do my best to remember to repeat the question before leaping ahead to give the answer. I see we've got a remote microphone here, so if you want to pose your question, Mark will hold the microphone as you speak. Please raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question about the teachings. Susan has a question. I'd like to see the microphone get all the way over to you. Why don't you just stand up, Susan, where you are and project your voice?
This is actually too big a question, but nobody else raised their hands right away. So, I'm still trying to figure out who it is yearning for reuniting with the I Am Presence. What is it? It's not the ego, and it's not the human records. And what is it? I don't understand what it is. Who is it that the I Am Presence loves, and who is it that's yearning for reunion with the I Am Presence?
At Acropolis Sophia, one of the principles that we explain over and over again is that in order to create potential energy that can be converted from potential energy into kinetic energy, there is a technique that is utilized by the Godhead throughout all creation. The technique is to take that which is fundamentally one, fundamentally an undivided whole, and to create separation between that which is intrinsically one. And by this device, create the compelling need to return to the original state of wholeness and oneness. And the separation then is potential energy. The threefold flame itself is one example of how this is done. Pink, blue, and gold are one flame. It's a threefold flame, not three flames. So pink, blue, and gold are really white, but they separate as a mode of pink, blue, and gold so that they can snap back together. Saint Germain calls that the plus and minus fling. And it is the means whereby energy is converted from this potential state into energy in motion or kinetic motion. So the answer to your question then is that the threefold flame within your beating heart is an undivided portion of the threefold flame of your mighty I Am Presence. Really and truly one and the same flame. And that flame in your heart has come out and extended itself through the dimensions of vibration, much more than through space, but through dimensions. It has stepped itself down and pointed outward towards the matter world, and thereby created the ability for the flame in matter to call to the flame in the I Am Presence and to release the light of the I Am Presence to be the slingshot action that comes forth into the matter planes and produces all of the miracles that we call for in our decrees. If the I Am Presence did not descend through that action of the threefold flame, it would not have the authority to act in this world. So it is that heart yearning for itself that wants to return to that original state of oneness, which it indeed shall do. But in the meantime, it is the tie that binds. Blessed be the tie that binds our hearts in Christian love. It is that heart tie between your heart and the heart of your God presence that knows that these twain are in fact uno, and wants to have them come back into that original state of absolute oneness once again. In the book of Genesis, the patriarchs, Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, had all been cautioned by the Lord that they should remain within the boundaries of the Holy Land. And for the most part, this was obeyed until it was time when the drought had occurred and Joseph had invited his 12 brothers and his father Jacob to leave the drought that was in the Holy Land and sojourn in Egypt. And Jacob wrestled with his own heart and prayed because he wanted to obey that commandment, not to leave the Holy Land. The Holy Land in this case is the sacred realm of the mighty I Am Presence, the consecrated perfect spheres of the innermost worlds. And so when he prayed, the Lord said to him, "Fear not to go down into Egypt, for I shall go down with you." And that symbolically represents the heart of the I Am Presence descending into the earth plains, into Egypt, proverbial land of darkness outside of the Holy Land. And so the threefold flame of the God Presence has come down and become like the prodigal, caught up in what is going on out here in the outer world, ensnared in the appearances, so much so that the prodigal heart flame no longer knows itself to be the beloved of the Father-Mother presence. And it thinks, oh, I'm just not good to be anything more than a servant in the household of my Father. But even that is better than the life that I'm living now, so I'll go home with my tail between my legs and beg to be taken back, only to find out that this great presence has this infinite love and has no desire other than to restore the divine estate to that portion of its own selfhood, blood of its blood, bone of its bone, muscle and marrow and sinew of its own nature, to restore it back to the high office of firstborn of the I Am Presence. In each heart flame that is an embodiment is just that very thing. It is the firstborn of the God Presence. So that is where you have this apparent sense of duality. You can know yourself in this world as that heart flame, as well as knowing yourself as the Christ and the expression of the God Presence, which upon the ascension you will once more re-become in its fullness. We had another question here.
I had a question about when the masters come. First of all, I noticed that you look around, and I had a feeling before that it was very busy in this room, not that just sitting, but it was very, very busy. A lot of angels, a lot of commotion, a lot of people in the robes sitting around. That's what I saw. But when you talk to the masters, I know that you have to probably speed up your frequency and they have to slow down in order to meet somewhere, right? I may be wrong. Do you directly hear them, or Is it like just they're telling me and then you kind of like in a second later you just repeat what they're saying?
I understand
I'm
very...
new. Excuse me, I'm new. Maybe you know, the others maybe know that, but I don't.
The question that you ask is a natural question. It is one that we can appreciate the desire for you to know. I would tell you, I don't know if you recall, but El Moria, when his first address yesterday, when he spoke to you, he talked about the many who would seek to co-opt the I am faith and to claim that they are doing the same as the masters are doing through the temple. This is a phenomenon that has gone on as long as there have been messengers. And because of that mimicry and imitation that sometimes does occur, we are under a certain injunction from the Brotherhood to be somewhat chary when it comes to the actual spiritual mechanisms that take place with the dictations and the discourses. Because were we to spell it out to you in chapter and verse, as we would fully be able to do, pretty soon you'd be reading about it everywhere. Pretty soon you would be having others who would be describing the same thing that would occur. And so there is process by which the masters test those who are possible candidates for this office over many lifetimes and engage them in training, and eventually, when the Brotherhood deems it wise, they themselves are the ones who, especially beloved Saint Germain, will anoint those to that office. There will be certain information that we entrust to a spiritual body within the temple that is known as the Collegia Serapis. And we will equip them with certain training that will enable them to better identify those whom the masters might anoint as messengers to follow after us, as we hope they will, in the temple of the presence. The only thing I will tell you is that the messengers must fulfill the law of Octaves. The law of Octaves is something that I could probably talk about for a whole week without ever repeating myself, even once. But basically it says that each world has its own natural laws and rules that reign supreme in that world. The physical world is one such world, the emotional another, the mental world is another world. Wherever the threefold flame finds itself, whichever realm it is anchored in and awakens within, it is subject to the law of that realm. And nature does not really allow for that law to be transgressed, except for it to be fulfilled. And what that means is that for those who have ascended, since they are not any longer going to be born in earthly form, the only way that they can really step forth lawfully, publicly, as they do, is when another life stream goes to where they are and fulfills the law of Octaves that allows them to step forth. And through a whole host of means, that is part of the process that takes place with the receipt of their living presence. I think that all of you should understand that first, with your own beloved Holy Christ self, you work with your heart flame first. Then your heart flame is like first gear. Get into your heart flame, get that whole heart flame really moving through the four lower bodies, and then you shift to your Holy Christ self, which is second gear. And then when you are fully in the mantle and the vibration and the overshadowing, and you have risen in attunement into the body of your Holy Christ self, then you have the garment and the consciousness and the mind that is able to relate directly to the electronic body, which is kind of like third gear. So you don't skip through all of those intermediate stages. You go 1, 2, 3, and get up to speed in that way. And all of you have the supreme privilege of being, as it were, a messenger for your own mighty I Am presence. Not that you're going to go around and give messages to people from your presence, saying, my presence told you this is what's supposed to happen tomorrow, or this is what you're supposed to do. But you can be the chalice for your own presence to act through you in this world. And that is such a all-encompassing and complete, magnificent thing. No one need ever have any ambitions higher than being the full repository and chalice of their own I Am presence. That is the sunum bonum of all of life, greater than anything else. And I know that as you enter into that consciousness of holding the light of your own electronic body and your own I Am presence, you will be whole, you will be content and fulfilled, you will want for nothing. And there won't be any little unfulfilled ego that has to shine. It'll be enough for you to know that you are expressing that presence.
Good evening. I have a few questions about the causal body. For example, is it the blue sphere that is the lowest vibrating of those colors? And does the causal body itself have a body? I know the masters would like it represented as colored spheres, but I'm wondering if it does have an actual body, because it seems unique. It stands out that it is spheres, and we know that there's form to the lower bodies, there's a form to the Holy Christ self and to the electronic body. Secondly, I'm wondering if, and I heard an answer to this question, I wanted confirmation. Once ascended, an ascended master, if I'm correct, it's understood that you can see the causal body. And so I'm wondering, is that correct, that although the ascended master is existing in their electronic body, if I have that right, that their causal body, although they're ascended, is still in that lower realm, lower than the ascended octave?
The first question was about the blue sphere of the causal body. I've never really looked at the question of the relative rates of vibration, higher or lower of one than the other. I would like to defer on that because it's not something that I have necessarily addressed before. You have the sequence of the 7 rays, but that's not necessarily an indication of the rate of vibration that each of them is going to fulfill. Second question was whether or not there is an image similar to a physical form that you would find within the realm of the causal body. I'm not sure that you necessarily would, for this reason. There are 7 subplanes to each world. And in some of the subplanes you have form, and others who have formless, as in the diaphanous rings or spheres of color. And in the causal body, you already have 7 subplanes, each accounted for and depicted in the rings of the causal body. So that really does stand forth as a realm where sound and formless color are the predominant momentum. by its very nature, this realm of the causal body is a realm where energy is latent, energy is stored, but it is not per se active. And so in that sense, you would not expect necessarily to find a form as such. The third question had to do with whether or not the Ascended Masters are all up in the Ascended Master octave, bumping into one another's causal bodies as they move from place to place. And it really is a very simple question. It has to do with a focus of the attention. Where is the attention of the ascended being focused? Just as you can shift your attention from place to place, you can shift the focus of your eye from near to far. Even so, the Ascended Masters have a vast, vast range of vibration where they are capable of focusing their attention. And although they are in the fullness of the divine mind, they are in one sense in touch with every part of life. In another sense, you should not have the sense that every Ascended Master is burdened with everything that's going on all the time, everywhere, and that their consciousness is some mad scramble of phones ringing and teletypes going off and computer screens, and it's not like NORAD necessarily, where everything is coming into every master's consciousness. The masters are graced with the capability of knowing what they need to know, finding out what they need to find out, but they are not so very far removed from our own way of expressing that they do not have the convenience of living in a realm of light where they are able to dial in their perception to the observance of that degree of nature that they would wish to observe at any one given time. So for most of the time, it is very convenient that the realm of the causal body and the great sea of universal light and many, many other things are in the akasha. They are in the clear, limpid ethers, but they are not crowding so much around your consciousness that life is a clutter at that level. So they're able to do the work they need to do. If there is a dispensation that is required for a life stream that requires them to look down the karmic record or the causal body of that life stream, then they will focus their attention there and they will read that record and they will take the assessment of the causal body. Or they may be resonating with the causal body of one or more of the other Ascended Masters. But they are not always in that state of attention, focused attention, that would bring all of this simultaneously before even their spiritual gaze, without a specific reason to do so. Okay, next question.
I'm very new, and this is a very simple question. When Carolyn was dictating, it might have been yesterday, it might have been today, I don't know. But she referred to Godfrey. And in the context, it sounded like she was referring to God. And I was sort of surprised, and I had never heard the name Godfrey in any of the decreeing and everything I've been doing all weekend. So could you please explain her use of that name?
Before you sit down, turn to your right and look back over the heads of everyone there, and you can see there a very illustrious gentleman standing in his white suit before a picture of Saint Germain. That is one of the predecessors of ourselves in the office of messenger, beloved Guy Ballard with his twin flame, Edna Ballard. When they took the ascension, they were given a new name, as Jesus referred to in the book of Revelation. Everyone who overcomes is given a white stone and a new name. So the Ascended Master name for this ascended being is Godfrey. beloved Godfrey. And it was Saint Germain himself who just this afternoon made reference to beloved Godfrey early on in his work. You don't have to walk very far there.
What is the needle ray? Is that the emerald ray? And just what is the action of the needle ray?
Very good question. In the first page of our calls to the Emerald Matrix in your book, there's a call to the needle ray. The needle ray is the faculty of the divine mind, which is able to focus the attention to the nth degree of minuteness, if you will, down to not only a physical atom, but down to an atom of emotional substance or an atom of mental substance. All of these have shorter and shorter wavelengths, long beyond the pale of any mechanical instrument to ever detect. So this needle ray is this pinpoint, dead-on, accurate vision of the divine mind that is able to go right to the very nadir, the very core of any condition, and discern what is acting there and direct the light right on point. It is not only the ability to expose what's happening there, but the simultaneous ability to direct the light right to its very specific target with pinpoint accuracy every single time and hit it bang straight on. That kind of penetration is only possible when you have intelligence focusing within the divine mind and the capacity of the all-seeing eye of God to have that kind of absolute minute control. Years ago, they published in Time magazine a little picture, and it spelled out IBM, and it was little BBs on a little background, and these were individual atoms of some element that had been manipulated one at a time and moved around one atom at a time until they spelled IBM. That ability to control quanta of energy with absolute precision is one of the qualities of the emerald ray. It is a fine tuning of the divine mind. It requires attention to detail. Detail, some of us don't like detail. We like the big picture, and we don't like to be bothered with the detail. Some of us are sloppy with numbers or sloppy with different things, but there is tremendous power in being able to control detail down to individual photons, individual electrons, individual atoms, and direct them with absolute precision and fine-tuning. I always make the joke, and I probably shouldn't make this joke too many more times, or I'm going to have to come back and learn to do Spanish lace, because I always say that the one thing that I'd never want to do in this life is have to make all those little stitches and all of those tiny things that you work at for hours and days and weeks and end up with something the size of a men's handkerchief after all those months of work. But that is the power of the emerald ray, the needle ray, that controls creation one atom and one electron at a time. Of course, it's doing many, but it is directing with that absolute precision. And because of that, when you have that kind of control, you can create beauty, and you can sort through and separate out the wheat from the chaff, the good seed from the bad seed. You can get everything done that has to be done. So nothing is too small for that needle ray of the emerald light to go right into it and deal with it.
Did the Ascended Masters and their various embodiments have children? And if they did have children, were the children aware of their attainment?
The answer is quite simply yes and no. They had children. Yes, they had children, and yes, sometimes they knew of their attainment, and sometimes they didn't. Part of that had to do with the readiness of the child to actually have an expanded consciousness, to be able to actually take in the attainment that the parent may have had. If that attainment wasn't there on the part of the child, they wouldn't have a frame of reference for even absorbing or appreciating, or much less actually acknowledging the attainment of their parents. It's not always the case that the only reason why a child would be born to someone of high attainment is because they likewise have high attainment. There are other karmic conditions and karmic relationships that sometimes are being wound up for one reason or another. I could cite many examples of that. The case of beloved Jesus, when he was embodied as King David, he already had vast attainment, but he had a salt and pepper combination of children, some light bearers and others murderers, others betrayers of King David's own light, who saw his life and his throne and his wives. So it's not always that much consistency there in the outer expression. I will tell you one thing that beloved Saint Germain said to the light bearers in one of the previous activities through beloved Godfrey, who was then the messenger. He said that if those who were his students and who were applying the path as he had described it with the full fervor of their hearts, that he could not possibly have loved them more had they been children of his own flesh and blood in a previous lifetime. That the bond between an ascended master sponsor and the students that that master sponsors, the bond between a guru and the chela of that guru, is the greatest bond of all this side of the ascended state. It is often referred to as the father and a son, spiritually speaking. That is how high and intimate and powerful that bond is. And all of you can rest assured that you, each one, have a place in the hearts of the ascended masters, a very dear place. They want to put their arm around you when you're discouraged. They want to wipe away the tears and the sense of fright, should you ever be so affrighted. They would give their right arm if they could suffer in your place. They love you that much. And they are so very happy when you are applying the law, because they are looking to that day when they will greet you as you step through the veil and enter their realm. I know that Saint Germain will be one of those who is right there to shake your hand and congratulate you on your victory upon the moment of your ascension.
Monroe, last night the god and goddess Meru asked us to put our attention on our root race. And I've been in the teachings for a while, but I know very little about the root races, and I wondered if you could just tell me a little bit about each one, the fourth and the fifth and the sixth. Thank
All
you.
right. Long before you ever took embodiment, long before you, in your presence, had yet fashioned the four lower bodies, or even the body of the Holy Christ Self, you began a very long journey of exploration, stepping forth. Mind you, every time you might see a literary device or a description in any of the teachings that would make the creation of your I Am Presence a passive act, you have to catch that in mid-thought and not let it occur, because you, in your presence, were not created. You, as the Godhead, elected to step forth. It was an act of dynamism, a very much free will engagement to step forth in that moment of individuality. Since that time, you and your twin flame have been on a pilgrimage, eventually finding your way to a world such as this, and taking up residence initially in the heart of the sun of Helios and Vesta. And there, in this vast, vast world of Helios and Vesta, there are these great solar fire rings, like unto the rings of Saturn. There's not only 7, there's 12 and more. We know of the 7 rays, we know of the 5 secret rays. Those form 12 major archetype actions of the sacred fire. Each of these is vast enough to be worlds in and of itself. And so, beginning in the white fire core of being, the 2 mighty I Am Presence, twin flames, began exploring outward through the electronic rings that surrounded the sun behind the sun of Helios and Vesta, tarrying for greater and longer periods of time in each of those worlds. Now, all the time that this is going on, the I Am Presence is drawing light from the great central sun and qualifying light. And so already the causal body is beginning to fill in with color. And the longer each presence stays in each of those rings, the more color will be built up in that particular band of their own causal body. The presence is going through each of these worlds, and by no means would the twin flames necessarily go through in lockstep with one another. Already there may well be distinctiveness and a free will choice of one to tarry longer in one of those realms than in the other. Through it all, the presence is experiencing the vibration of each of these rays, the God consciousness of each of these, and discovering within itself what it loves best about what it's experiencing. Where is its bliss, if you will? And eventually coming to that awakening from within out, within its own consciousness, that, aha, this is the ray that I choose to specialize in. This is my native habitat. And so, using beloved El Moria for an example, that home he found in the blue ray and the blue plume. His love, his first love, is the will of the Godhead and all that that portends for him. And so naturally, he did have a tendency to spend more time in that realm than the others. And naturally, that being the case, qualifying more life, built up more momentum in his blue causal body ring than in the others. But spending enough time in all the other rays to have a modicum of attainment at inner levels already on all of those 7 rays and the 5 secret rays as well. So when it comes time for those who choose, and the decision to come into embodiment is likewise a choice that is made by the I Am Presence. It's not an absolute imperative. There are other lines of life and unfoldment and service that can and are elected. But for those who do make themselves candidates to become ascended masters, then that is made known to the hierarchy and the sun, and eventually the Manus will look across the causal bodies of those who are applying to become candidates to become ascended masters and to take incarnation. And they will cull out those who have a predominance of a momentum in their ray. So the first root race will have a predominance of first ray individuals, second ray, third ray, fourth ray, so on and so forth. So each of the Manus will magnetize those who are already sharing an empathy. They understand each other, the Manus of those root races and those momentums, because they already share a common devotion and fervor for that aspect of the Godhead. And so likewise, the members of that root race begin to feel a certain fraternity, a certain brotherhood and sisterhood for one another, because they share this common bond of devotion to this great broad range. I need to back up for just a second and explain something that we talked about at the last class, and that is the divine archetypes of the Godhead. We make a division of 7, a division of 5, which makes for 12. Those 12 become 144. Those 144 become 144,000. 12,000 on each of the 12 rays. These are major aspects of the nature of the Godhead, the nature of Brahman, this immensity, this absolute, that is the presence, that is the background on which all creation has been hung. All of that has all of this nature, these character traits, if you will, of the Godhead within it. And so those character traits are there as divine principles. And that word also relates to the word archetype. And so each of the masters, if you'll notice, do tend to incarnate archetypes of the Godhead. For example, beloved Jesus incarnates peace and love in that sense. He is the Prince of Peace, the principle of peace. So an impersonal ray of a God quality that is across the cosmos as a quality personifies and takes individuality and incarnates and becomes a living presence. So that is what is going on through all of this. Mighty Victory is another great example of a being who has become the living embodiment of the quality which he knows God to be. So these root races then arrange themselves in these 7 major configurations and mandalas of life streams, all who share a common devotion to a specific flame. And you can know a great deal about the root race by knowing the ray of the root race. That will tell you so very much, because you know already many of the nuances behind what's involved in the first ray of the will of God, the power of God, the blueprint, the concept of divine destiny. All of those things are involved there. So that is, even in the word race, root race, it is the root rays that are coming forth out of these 7 roots of the God presence. So it's not what race do you belong to, but what rays do you belong to. and is your primary ray. And that's why in the invitation of the Manus, you are expected to by now have some affinity for your own ray and know more or less what root race you would participate in by and large. Now, just like in college, you can have a major and a minor. You might have a minor ray that you also are very devoted to, and some individuals may have a double major. And if you're ever going to be the Lord of the world, you have to have a septuple major. You have to have full attainment on all of the 7 rays, because you've got to be able to relate to every single person on the planet, regardless of what ray they are on. You've got to be able to relate to them fully and ensoul the whole planetary body. So you ensoul more and more of the full panoply of God consciousness as you move on and on throughout creation. The last point I would make about all of this, something that was revealed to us, I guess it was 6 months ago. I'm not quite sure when the conference, the Daystar of Destiny, took place. But I'll leave this one point with you on this whole subject. The unascended presence is shown and entrusted the vision of that presence as an ascended being. At the end of the cycle, the Alpha and Omega of the ascended being, Alpha being the beginning of the cycle and Omega being the end. The vision of the ascended being is the Omega side of that. And so that vision is beheld by the I Am Presence. And when the Presence elects to achieve that vision, it gives the fiat that it is going to descend into the earth and it is going to ascend back to the heart of God as the ascended being. And that becomes a cosmic fiat. It's a vow. Vows are powerful. Very, very powerful. They bind life. And they continue to bind life until they are undone. So when the presence makes that fiat and that vow, it ties the destiny and the future to compliance with that vow. Ever thereafter, all of that power, all of that vision, all of that momentum that was like a nuclear explosion when the presence gave that fiat, it's all encapsulated in the star engram of that initial decree to descend into embodiment. And that is called the Daystar of Destiny. And ordinarily, that fiery engram remains like one of those sparkling, twinkling lights you see in the causal body. It remains there close to the electronic body. When it is time for that life stream to actually make their ascension, that star becomes the Bethlehem star of the embodying life stream when they take their final incarnation, when it is possible for them to ascend. The star comes down with them so that it can dispense its momentum and cause the ascension to take place. So you should all catch that falling star and put it in your pocket and save it for the day of your ascension. We're going to take a couple more questions.
I'm new in this practice, and I was wondering, I've been very eager to draw people in my area to come and decree with, and this is the most perfect conference to come to, and you've answered a lot of my questions. And I know that if I burn a little brighter and hold the flame, that I should draw the right people to me. But specifically, I know there's been many ideas that have been given to me from friends, and even today, some more suggestions of things that I might do specifically to draw people. And I kind of wanted to know what things are basically allowed and what things are not, such as, say, the individual miniature portraits that we have of the I Am Presence. Can we hand those out, putting like a name and phone number on the back? Can I put flyers out or posters up? And if indeed I do attract some people and some willingness to get together, what things then can I do? I don't know enough to speak. So can I have them listen to the website? There are, say, Sunday services, or can we decree? Can we use the decree book and actually decree together? It would be a little bit of a far shot to take people off the street and think they're just going to sit down and decree with me. So that'd be nice, but do you have any suggestions for me specifically?
The First World Congress, the Masters called for a full, complete package of materials to be produced that we would put in the hands of every one of you who feel like they wish to share this message with more and more students. And we came back from that First World Congress in Tucson, and for at least 2 of our Acropolis Sophia sessions, the workshops in the mornings were devoted to putting together all of the materials that would become a kind of a do-it-yourself kit to conduct meetings. We have been working on that ever since. Our staff was working diligently before Carolyn and I flew out to Vermont this trip, in the hopes that we might actually have that ready to put in your hands, every one of you who wanted to have it. It is not quite to the finish line yet. I almost want to say that it's become Schubert's unfinished symphony. But it must be finished. And there is a great deal of practical information that has been put together, including sample flyers, how you find rooms, how you arrange with a couple of other students to do the preparatory work. All of that has been laid out. It's going through another series of review right now. We've already put together quite a bit of material, recorded discourses and dictations, and outlines of some of that material, so that you can practice on your own, referring to the outlines, but putting it into your own words and putting your own heart flame into it. In addition, we want to try to furnish everyone not only with a little handout of a chart of the presence, but we'd like to have one of the arcs of the presence of various sizes, showing the 4 ascended masters as well as the mighty I Am Presence as visual aid and a backdrop to the meetings that you will hold. It's under advisement now if the quality of MP3 is up to the master's standards that would allow us to put a vast amount of material on 1 or 2 CDs. So all of that is being put together. In addition, we have Linda here, who is working with the Hyksos Liaison, which is our office of outreach and the office that coordinates the efforts of the altar groups and the teaching centers and the temples around America and around the world, that can be a resource that you can touch base with and coordinate with. So I think informally, we would like to have some sense that the individual who is speaking in our name and in the name of the temple, that they do have their own true understanding of the way in which the masters wish the information to be presented. There is quite a variety of the ways in which these teachings have been presented down through the many decades since Saint Germain first brought them forth, some better than others. And so I think that for wherever possible, and this may not always be possible for reasons of distance or expense involved, we would like to see someone have at least one Acropolis Sophia session where they have been grounded in that core of the material before they hang out their shingle and start teaching themselves. So that, I think, is something that we can work with on an individual basis. So it is absolutely imperative, and I assure you that it will continue to receive both Carolyn and my personal attention when we return later this month, to see that all of that material is codified for you. There will be, in addition to the how-to manuals, and frankly, I think in some respects the how-to manuals are almost completed. It's more the outlines of the course material that needs more work. But we envision on-demand book that has a great deal of this material that could become a basic text that the students who take your courses would take home with them and study from one week to the next when they would attend these meetings. So all of that is very much in the fore. Those who are with us tell us that our activity is covering a great deal of ground quickly. I have to tell you that we have to abide within a certain measure of patience, because otherwise we would be very impatient to have all of this in your hands. Having come, as most of us do, from organizations that have been around for many, many decades and seem to have every bell and whistle and full development, we have high expectations. And I want to affirm those high expectations. That is a standard that we are determined that we will produce from the Bread of Life Productions Department of the Heart Center all of the materials in printed form and the CDs of the materials that are needed for this work to go forward. More and more is being released through the internet. You do have the access to the perpetual voice broadcasts, which are going on round the clock. So that is something you can do. Give your own introductory remarks and perhaps dial in one of those broadcasts. There's a whole variety of ways that this can be done. If you listen again, and I do imagine that this weekend of instruction will become part of the preparatory material for those who want to do this. And if you listen again to the discourses on love and compassion and recognizing that there are those torchbearers who are out there, part of the 10,000 in your city, that are waiting for you to contact them, and you feel the tug of your heart flame and your compassion towards them, you will find a way to reach them. Love will find a way. I know I haven't answered every single one of your questions. I wish that we could just call for the ushers to hand out the booklets right here in this moment, but it's not going to happen today or tomorrow, but God willing, it will happen very, very quickly. And you can immediately get in touch with the office, the Hyksos liaison, and they will be sure to make sure that you receive those materials the minute they are produced. Should we take one or two more questions?
Hi. I have been defending, maybe not very well, but I've been trying to defend the Ascended Master's teachings against the human preoccupation with psychic phenomenon to my friends and loved ones who are preoccupied with it.
What kind of phenomenon?
Psychic.
Psychic phenomenon, okay.
They are insisting that our culture's current fascination with celebrity psychics and mediums is actually assisting the mission here. Number one, these people are providing a service to humanity by helping grieving people and thereby perfecting or balancing their own karma. And also, because they are forcing or allowing people to, or encouraging people to focus on the spiritual, they are helping to raise the consciousness of the planet. And how might I respond to that? I'm asking for your assistance.
I'm only pausing because I do understand what you are dealing with. We have a number of releases on the dangers of psychism that are published and are available. And one of the first things that I would do is absorb myself in that material until you do understand it more thoroughly yourself. Part of the challenge with those who are infatuated with psychic things is that it becomes like a vaccination against the real meat of the spirit. It actually immunizes someone from taking in the real light, and it makes it very difficult. And quite frankly, Saint Germain has explained that those who become infatuated and drawn into the fascination with psychic phenomenon may be pulled into a momentum that carries through a series of 3, 4, or 5 lifetimes. And the mercy of the law at the end of that long cycle of involvement is that every single last vestige of any kind of registration of the inner planes is stripped away from their chakras so that they are not able to detect those vibrations. They have to be put on a fast of anything that deals with the intermediate planes or the spiritual planes. So they end up at the end of that series of embodiments as agnostics or atheists because they don't feel any vibration. But for them, not feeling anything for a period of time is intended to wean them out of this fascination with the psychic. And hopefully, after all of that is done, they can begin again with the heart chakra and begin again with a desire for God, for the love of God in their life. There is a total difference between interest in the intermediate realms and the different little things that go on there and those who have a hunger for the living presence in their life. We, long ago, made peace with ourselves and said, if it's only the two of us and Saint Germain and the Ascended Masters, so be it. We're not going to pander to the appetites of many for those kinds of vibrations that they want to feel in their worlds, because it is a road to destruction. Psychism has a sister, and her name is poverty. She also has another sister, and her name is infirmity. Psychism drains away all of the vital energies of life that are intended to produce health and well-being and all of the good abundance of God in nature. It is the course that Atlantis took. Atlantis got involved to where they were able, with machinery, to begin to manipulate some of these finer forces of nature. And the whole of their civilization went down that road. And because there was not God in the equation, they ended up blasting their continent from above the waves by the misuse of that energy, because it was a war of the worlds type thing. I hate to say it because I know that there's a lot of trends in favor of, for example, the Harry Potter books. But what did you see in the second episode of that movie? But one wizard using his forces and powers against other wizards, relative good against relative evil. That whole thing starting all over again. And nowhere was there a true breath of devotion to the transcendent nature of the Godhead. So, the truth of the matter is that those who wish to pursue those things, you may present the truth of the law to them. If they don't choose to accept it, and if you aren't able to touch their heart flames with the hunger for the living presence, then you must bow before their free will and move on and release the hold that you feel to save them or to persuade them, because you could spend a long time in a fruitless endeavor. Meanwhile, you're not pursuing your path. Many years ago, Saint Germain said, "Give me 10 dedicated washerwomen, and I will change the world." 10 dedicated washerwomen that would just follow the path as he had outlined it, and he would change the world. And so that's the formula that we are invoking. I'll give you another example of this. Those of you who know me know that I bear great love for the golden ages of ancient Greece, for the truths of cosmic law that are included in so many of the stories of the Olympian deities, some of whom were actual episodes where the masters would appear to them and then the story would be written, not unlike the way in which Mother Mary might appear to Mexican peasant, and now we have the whole story of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So there were many cases in which Apollo and Pallas Athena and other of the ascended masters were at work, moving in and amongst the more illumined portions of the Greek peoples. And there was a time when I asked the masters why it was that all of that had to die out so completely. And they explained that it was the incursion of psychism that was overtaking the more pure elements that had been there, and that it was thought best for the future of Western civilization to just seal the whole thing off entirely and go forward with the mainstream of Christianity as Jesus had brought it forth. It's better not to have any opening into those intermediate worlds than to have the incursion of that psychic. And so, for the most part, we have had a frozen theology that has crept along for a couple thousand years now that didn't really foster that kind of thing, and it was a safeguard that was a protection to millions of life streams and to a whole civilization has grown up because those things were verboten. And as stifling as it was, the protection was thought to be more important. So now the lid is off of Pandora's box again, and it's back to so much of that other stuff. And I've given this explanation. I'll give it one final time, and then we'll move on. When a person allows that psychic substance to coat their chakras at inner levels look like that gray lining on the inside of a drain that repels water. That's what happens to the chakras. The true light of the Spirit is like water off a duck's back. It just rolls right off. Those who have those momentums, they may be able to sense the light for the few moments that someone else is focusing that light, and they say, yes, I sense that vibration. Oh, that's great, that's great. But it falls through their fingers. It doesn't stay in the garments. It doesn't stay charged there. because this psychic substance is this oily material that just coats the sensitive surface of the chakras and doesn't allow for the true light to give its reinforcement. That is why Ascended Master students, there is no real stress here on having those centers open prematurely before the real thrust to your God presence is carved all the way through to the Ascended Octave. There'll be plenty of time for all of that after the Ascension. But what's more important is that you swim like a salmon upstream. You've got to make your own pathway through those nether worlds. And you can't be caught, oh, look at that glowing flower over there. Oh, look at this pretty butterfly flitting through the air. If you get fascinated and stop on those intermediate levels, you're not going to press on through. And no one should stop until they have reached the inner Holy of Holies of their own mighty I Am presence. So I haven't given you much to say to them, but I trust that you have heard the voice of the Master in what I've said to you. To you. Last question.
Just a minute, I have something to say. It should be enough to have your mighty I Am presence in your world. For people who want more, they've never tasted their mighty I Am presence. They don't have a sense of what it means to be in the enfolding arms of love of God. They have only wished. They have only desired, but never attained that. So the best that they can do is play around in those intermediate worlds. And you will find throughout much of the New Age community, Monroe has coined the smorgasbord of unclean meats because it is filled with psychism. We have stopped doing the New Age fairs for the most part. I won't say that we'll never do perhaps one of the larger ones, but seldom do students come in from those arenas. And the reason they don't is because there is so much fascination with, as Saint Germain was referring to, the baubles. You can't forge those intermediate planes to your mighty I Am presence when you are putting so much attention in other areas of life. It doesn't work. It would be the same as if you were going out carousing every night, going from one bar to the next, or picking up prostitutes on the street. And I'm not exaggerating. There is that much waste. Moreover, it opens up the life streams into the astral pit. And when there is a yen for this, the negative spirals that begin as seeming fun and netherworldly and a little different, and oh, this must be wonderful, this must be spiritual, and I must have attainment, leads to, as Monroe says, the depreciation of all of the good light that you are given daily, fed off into the astral plane, until there is such poverty of the spirit of light in your own chakras that sin, disease, and death ultimately take over, and you check out of this lifetime and move on to the next. The mighty I Am presence determines that you have accomplished all that can be done, and something or another happens in your life, and it's sayonara. Now that is the real bottom line, and it's sad. It's very sad. It's sad because it doesn't have to be. Many of those who are caught in psychism, in channeling this or that entity from some spaceship, or even naming it after the names of the ascended masters and channeling psychic imposters, are truly doing a great disservice to their own life stream and their own mighty I Am presence. Because ultimately, they are going to have to balance every jot and tittle of karma that is ensued by the ripple effect of what they are telling other life streams, and how those life streams are acting on what is being told, and how that tying in to the astral substance and siphoning off the pure light of these precious life streams is building karma upon karma upon karma. And as Monroe says, this was the downfall of Atlantis. This was what brought civilizations of the past down. It's a great trust that Saint Germain has given the students, and most especially those in America first, to be the guardians of the I Am faith, so that there would be the opportunity for the right use of this wonderful teaching. A lot of those who were on Atlantis were those practicing the black arts, are many of the channelers that you see today, are many of those giving the psychic readings or pretending to. And it is very sad. What is even more sad are those of our Christian brothers and sisters who are entering into the fundamentals of Christianity and practicing the speaking in tongues. The speaking in tongues is no more than psychism by another name. This is also a tragedy, for they, in good conscience, go to their local churches. Their friends, their relatives are all there, and they think this is wonderful and healthy and wholesome. And they want to bring their children into it. And then you have the whole feeding into the psychic world in the speaking of tongues. I know this firsthand, for I have visited such an outpouring of astral substance when tending to family members. It is very sad. So don't be shocked that you can't pull them out. It's a huge momentum. We give the calls for them. The Violet Flame Vigil is one of the best remedies for this type of action that's going on across the world. It is consuming a lot of that substance and putting it into the flame to allow for more and more to be freed from it. But you have to remember, they have to want to be freed first. And it is far more addictive than alcoholism or drugs. Far more addictive. Because they don't think that it is bad for them. They don't see the travesty. You can walk into any of the I Am sanctuaries right today and feel a charge of Saint Germain. We have done that. It is wonderful because the I Am activity adhered to Saint Germain's mandate to not enter into psychic work. They never allowed it in. Furthermore, they didn't allow gossip and all kinds of the things that we have begun to talk about and teach through the temple. If you want to have an environment that your family can be nurtured in, that your children that you bring forth into this world will have the best shot at growing into the adults that will have the fullness of their divine plan and the opportunity for themselves, you owe it to this generation and generations to come to give the violet flame, to give your calls daily. And even if you are a single person or have vowed a chaste life, you will find that you can do a great service for all mankind in giving these calls. We are living proof of those calls that were given in the 30s by the Ballards and the I Am activity, and then followed on the Bridge to Freedom, the Summit Lighthouse. The Temple of the Presence has the torch and is moving forward under the auspices of the Great White Brotherhood. But it will require that you put the blinders on, that you not be looking to the right or to the left, that you not be picking up the little crystals and the pendulums and all of those fascinating things that, yes, they have magnetism. Yes, you can move them with your mind. Yes, you can levitate. All manner of trickery and hocus pocus. Prestidigitalis, isn't that the word that you titled one of the discourses? You can do all kinds of that incredible phenomena. You can even sustain life in the physical body for hundreds of years. But that is not the goal of the I Am faith. The goal of the I Am faith is to know your true identity. Everything that we've been talking about this entire weekend. Who you are. You are your mighty I Am presence in action here in this world of form. In this world of form, you have earth, air, water, fire, akasha. You have all of these wonderful elements that you are here to learn how to move in, how to breathe in that prana, how to have the very cells spinning at a vibration that sloughs off anything of negativity. You would not be tempted into any psychism if you were charged with enough light in your aura that you were content. There wouldn't be any fascination or tantalizing of the senses because you're filled. When you are in the fullness of your mighty I Am presence, you are full. You don't have room for anything else save that which is of like nature to your mighty I Am presence. You likewise want to give only that which is the purity of the vibration. You don't want to stir up the stone soup. It's another title we have to do. The stone soup of the psychic world, and have people ingest that. There is so much that you can accomplish in your life with these teachings. There shouldn't be room for anything else. There's a big, wide, wonderful world out there with all of the glorious challenges to your mastery so that you can attain that which your mighty I Am presence is determined is of your best interest, is for you. It's not the same for me. It's not the same for Monroe. It is what you must do. You must garner this mastery. If you have an emotional body that gets out of control, It is your responsibility to bring it into God control. Not stilted, not stone, but in God control, in the poise of the light of your mighty I am presence that is required to hold the energy for you to do all that you need to do. I love these sessions when you ask questions, because they are questions that I would have asked 20, 30 years ago. And they are questions that do need to be answered. And I recall when I first had the opening of illumination to this teaching and instruction in this life, I ran to my mother, and she was the first that I wanted to share it with. But I didn't know what I was talking about. I just knew that I was on fire, and I was excited. Well, it scared her. She was from an Orthodox background of Christianity where this was very foreign in nature and didn't have a framework with which to receive it at that point. Since then, it's a different story. And she has seen the example of my life, my health, my well-being, the vibrancy and the joy of life that I didn't even have as a child. So setting the example for some is going to be the best way that you can share these teachings. And it won't be overnight for most, but for some it will be. For some, you will speak 2 sentences and it will resonate right with the heart, and then they won't let you shut up. They will want you to talk to the wee hours of the morning. They will want you to share with them every book that you own, every recording that you have. They will want you to accompany them to the ends of the earth because the fire has caught. Those life streams protect. Monroe and I are very, very protective of the new student that comes on fire, because we understand how rare that can be in this era when there is so much that tries to take the attention, so much that wants to heap responsibilities and returning karma on the shoulders of people and not give them enough even quiet time to reflect on what it is truly that life is all about for them. If I could stay in embodiment 200 years and be a vital mouthpiece for the Ascended Masters, I would do that very thing. And I would cover the earth, given the energy and the cycle to do that. This is why you have an activity of organized heart flames, so that you can multiply your heart's desire, our heart's desire, to reach more and more life streams. Yeah, organized religions are really, I could say a few words, but I won't. For the most part, we've all written them off. We've all had our fill of organizations in general. But it doesn't mean that you cannot come together and organize your heart flames in a concerted effort to move mountains if you have the light of God and your mighty I am presence at the helm. But first and foremost, that must be the message. the mighty I Am Presence. Everything else is going to follow in lockstep. That march that Saint Germain is wanting across the earth. And it all begins with you. Not us. It begins with you. We know who we are. We have seen the other side of the veil. We've been there. We've drawn in the instruction, the teaching. We're on our way to our ascension, God willing, and we stay on the straight and narrow path to the last breath. But it's our brothers and sisters, our mothers and fathers, our friends of ages past, that we desire to reawaken to this teaching and this instruction. Just like we were reawakened, you were reawakened. The hardest part you will find is when the dearest loved one to your heart can't resonate with what is so very precious to you. And I can only say that you can take solace in the fact that their time will come. For everyone is marching in this return to the heart of their mighty I Am Presence. And if not this lifetime, it will be another. And you must bide your patience and love them, love their mighty I Am Presence and Holy Christ Self, and stand as the example until such time as they elect to excite the threefold flame of their own heart and have it begin to pulse into this awareness of their true identity. It'll be easier in another 50 years, for there will be hundreds of thousands of light bearers on the planet, raising their torches high and proclaiming the I Am faith, because of what we all do today. But we have to be patient. We have to do our part and take each of those steps. And when you return to Florida, you return with a heart on fire, and you hold the vigil until the time when you have the materials in hand, and you are hitting the road then. You are moving through your town or going to the nearby town and postering. I started out postering in Florida. I know what Florida is all about. And it can be a very welcome environment. It is truly very welcome to these teachings. But what remains is for you, each one, to have the full sense of who you are. Once that occurs, there are no limitations. You have within you the capability of reaching first those in your immediate circle, and if they don't catch on fire, then you move out of your immediate circle. Many times you will find that those who do not know you from childhood are more likely to see you for the Christ that you are exhibiting than the ones that know all of the peccadillos and the imperfections of your past. It's a big, wide, wonderful world. And Saint Germain is ready for us all to move with lightning speed, but measured step. And that's an art. I think it's time to give you a break. If you would like to take a few moments I can tell you that Mother Mary is desirous of receiving your healing petitions, and Pallas Athena will be addressing. So get a hit of cool air outside and wake up, for there's more to come.